There he is, Patrick. It is so awesome always to get caught up with you. Bring me up to date. How's everything with you and the family? What's going on?
Everything's going well, Jim. I'm a little devastated by the Duke loss to UConn because my daughter's a sophomore at Duke, and I've been down there a bunch the last couple of years to, number one, to visit her, but to see some Duke b-ball. She was on the tennis team for a couple weeks, but then she was like, Dad, I think my future is in finance and economics. And I said, that's a very good decision, girl. You're going to be better off than your dad. And so that's where she went. But anyway, I was blown away by how they choked that yet again, Duke, for the third straight year. They were clearly the better team against UConn. So I was bummed about that. But I enjoyed the tournament overall, even though I thought the Final Four was a little flat overall. But my girls are good. I have twin daughters that are juniors now in high school, so they're on the college path. And I'm doing my multiple gigs, as you know all too well. And I'm continuing to just make it happen. And that's all we can do. I'm here in my basement. I got my treadmill behind me. They said, "Oh, you're supposed to be on this podcast with Jim Rome." I said, "I am?" I said, "Jim,
since when?
Really?
Wait, nobody told me that. What do you mean?
Nobody told me about that. But if it's Jim Rome and he's waiting for me in L.A., you're damn right. I'm going to get my shit together.
Maybe you should tell me
happen.
if I'm supposed to be on with Rome, because I'm the one who needs to know that I'm going to be on with Rome if I'm going to be on with Rome. All right, so there's so many great.
Is like the guy, like he's the man.
Yeah, I mean there's so many. But Patrick, there's so many great things in that response. Like I could go 8 different ways with that. So I'm trying to pick my spot. Your daughter who stopped playing tennis. So for instance, not on the same level, but both our boys played baseball through high school.
Right.
One of them had a look at some small college baseball, and I thought that would have been amazing, but I was not going to live my life through him. And he ultimately said, "You know what? Let me think. I could go to the Sticks and play for some D2 or D3 school, or I could go to Boulder and be a college student." And I'm like, I understand that. So when your daughter decided, "I've had enough tennis," were you good with that? Were you at peace with that, or was that hard?
I was good with that. Although, there's a little part of you that wants to see them do what you did. So you have to accept that as a parent, but you also have to accept the fact that they're their own person, right? And they have to do what they want to do. And I remember she said to me once, we were coming back from a tournament in New Jersey on, I think it was Memorial Day weekend, when she was like 11. She's 19, about to be 20. And she said to me, and she kind of like wasn't really into the match, which was the first time I'd ever seen that happen. I didn't say anything about it. And then we were in the car ride. We're about halfway home from Jersey, like an hour and 40-minute drive, just grinding on the Memorial Day weekend. I could have been watching the French Open, and I'm like, and she said, "Dad," she said, she started talking about the match. Because I had a thing, Jim, you never bring up the match or the game, in your case, if it's baseball, unless they bring it up. So she brought it up. And I said, "Yeah." I said, you kind of look like you weren't really that into it. And she says, "Well, I wasn't." And I said, "Well, that's kind of problematic if you're not, I don't care if you win or you lose, but you got to be into it." She said, "Dad, I'm not going to be a pro." And like that's like ringing in my head for like the last 8 years, Jim, when she said that to me, because there's a part of you that thinks, well, maybe you could be. And then the reality hits that she doesn't want any part of that. But the best thing that happened to her was that she ended up playing high school tennis for her team, and she got into the idea of being part of a team, which you miss in competitive junior tennis. So in the end of the day, that was the best thing for her. So I was like super happy about that. But there's a part of me that still wants tennis to be part of her DNA as a person, because tennis is a sport that you can play, for your entire life. So forget about playing at whatever competitive level. But that was definitely an experience for me, going around, taking her to junior tennis tournaments, as my dad did with me, years ago, and did with my brother John. And we got to that point where okay, we're good enough to become possible professional players. And people ask me all the time, "Well, why did you get into tennis?" Well, we played all the sports, Jim. We played baseball, we played basketball, we played soccer. In fact, both of us played soccer on our high school teams through high school, which would never happen these days if you were in a competitive sporting situation as a kid. I call it the over-professionalization of youth sports, which has happened, unfortunately, in every sport. And it's the reality of the world we live in when you want to play, if you want to play D1 sports, athletics. But to me, it's still a little bit of a negative for kids overall and their overall health.
No, I think you're right. I agree with all of that. So, Patrick, this notion of playing for a team, for instance, you did do that. You and John both went to Stanford. John, of course, left after his freshman year. Now, because you and I are close in age, and I grew up playing tennis in Southern California, I remember a lot of your contemporaries. I remember a lot of the guys you played with. I didn't play against them myself because I was not that good, but I knew of them because, I did play sectionals. I did play high school for a team that won CIF. So I remember them. That notion of being on a team, when you were on the farm, you were a part of 2 national champions. What was that like to be on a team for you at Stanford? And what was life like on and off the court for you there?
I absolutely loved it. I love college tennis. Our parents, Jim, taught us a couple of things when we were growing up, me and my brothers. Was one, education is most important. That's partly how we ended up at Stanford. Of course, tennis helped me get in with my SAT scores, as my twin daughters who are 17 are trying to go through that now. They're like, Dad, what were your SAT scores?
By the way, Patrick, do they still have SATs?
Well, they're back
kids?
now. Yeah, they went away for a couple of years, and now they're back.
Okay.
So now it's back. So they're looking at, going to, some Ivy League schools, whatever. And I'm like, girls, just go wherever you want to go. They're like, no, we want to go there. Okay, well, then you got to get your SATs up. What were your SATs, Dad? Well, don't ask me about that because I was number 1 in tennis, or number 2 in tennis. So that's how I got to Stanford. No, I loved college tennis, Jim, just like back to my point about my parents. Education, doing the best you can, no cheating. And if you ever get asked, if you ever get the opportunity to play for your country, to represent your country, you say yes. Y-E-S, yes, no other questions asked. That's partly why my brother was the greatest Davis Cup player of all time. That's partly why I was the longest running Davis Cup captain for 10 years, because I was committed to that. I was committed to the cause. So playing on a team for me was so much fun because, as I said, I love baseball. I love soccer. I love basketball. I wasn't very good at them. I was decent at soccer, but I was just much better at tennis, as was my brother John. John got offered scholarships, Jim, to play college soccer.
Yeah.
That's how good of an athlete he was. And obviously he made the right decision. Do you know that when he went to college at Stanford, went to the farm, he had already gotten to the semifinals of Wimbledon? Not the junior Wimbledon, the main draw of Wimbledon, right?
That's wild.
And and the reason he went to Stanford for the year was because my mom said, John, you're going to Stanford. Education is important. I want you to just go. And he's like, okay, Mom, I'll go for a year. And it was, in fact, he also talks about this. That was a way for him to sort of chill. And I know that's hard to believe about my brother, to chill and go have fun. And go be part of college. And of course, what did he do? Well, they won the team championship, and he won the individual championship as well as a Stanford student.
It's amazing. It really is that he at least he got that 1 year. At least he got that 1 year, and I bet he did enjoy that. Patrick, your career. You had a really nice career. You were ranked as high as number 28 in the world, which I think is amazing. You had a great, great career as a doubles player. If I were to say to you, can you pick a moment or two from your career that you're most proud of as a player, what would it be?
Well, for me, it would be making the quarterfinals as a singles player at the U.S. Open.
Yep.
I know I made the semifinals one year at not Wimbledon, at the Australian Open, which I had Boris Becker. I was up a set, and I had 2-3. He was serving at 30-40, and I remember thinking to myself, holy shit, I could be in the finals of the Australian Open. And guess what happened, Jim?
Yeah, you fell apart?
The wheels fell off. Yeah. Exactly.
You started thinking. You started thinking too much.
Exactly. I started thinking about it. So getting to the U.S. Open was our home tournament. We grew up, 15 minutes from Flushing Meadows, where the U.S. Open is played, also where Citi Field is now, where the old Shea Stadium was. I was listening to some stuff today about Super Bowl III when the Jets won the Super Bowl. My best friend, who I played doubles with, John Schmidt, was my doubles partner in the juniors. His dad was the center for Joe Willie Namath. John, you go back and look at Joe Willie Namath taking the snap, and number 52 is Schmidt. That's my best buddy's dad. Anyway, playing for college, playing for Stanford, but making that run to the quarterfinals of the U.S. Open, where I actually also lost to Becker, who I had beaten a couple of times in some big tournaments, including once at the Australian Open. I probably played the best match of my career, Jim, in a losing effort in the quarterfinals. I lost in 4 sets, like a 4+ hour match. But to me, that was the most exciting because I got to do it in front of my friends, my family, people that came out to watch me and supported me. Because for us, the McEnroes, growing up in Queens, that was the ultimate, being able to play well at the U.S. Open. My brother, of course, won it 3 times, or is it 4 times? He won 4 U.S. Opens, 3 Wimbledon. So, and I say to him, I remember saying to him one time, because we used to take the train in from Douglaston to the city, and then take the subway to go to school, to go to high school. Again, back to our parents' education. Education's the most important. We're going to put you on the train. We're going to send you to a private school, even when they couldn't afford it, to go into Manhattan to go to the best school in the country, Trinity High School. My brother Jim did that for 4 freaking years.
Wow.
He commuted an hour each way, back and forth to school, to get to high school. I did it for 1 year as a freshman, because then my parents moved into the city. So I was able to, then my commute went from an hour to 10 minutes. And I would say to John, do you ever think about that when you're on the train, man? Like when you go past City Field, used to be Shea, that, you won that thing? He goes, no, I don't really think about that.
Wild.
I was like,
That's
okay.
wild. You don't? Okay.
That is wild. Yeah. Okay.
That is.
I'm like, all right.
It's John.
Yeah.
John being John.
That's
trying to
Johnny
get inside
Mac,
John's
yeah.
head. All right, I get it. So you talk about Flushing Meadows, though, Patrick. For instance, when I went to college, I got my start in radio in Santa Barbara. So I was actually in the general orbit of Jimmy Connors back in that day, because he was up in Montecito. I was
he still lives out there.
Yeah, he does. And I was friendly, believe it or not, at that time with the surgeon who did the procedure on his wrist back in the day. So not to bring it up, but to bring it up, you nearly stopped his magical run in 91 from ever happening. What can you tell us about that first round match? And because you're a McEnroe and that was your home crew or home turf, and it was Flushing Meadows, and that match went on to 1:35 in the morning, is this not something we want to talk about? Is this something we can't talk about? Looking back on that, how do you feel about that?
Can I say yes to all those questions,
Yes,
Jim?
that's how I answer
Yes,
stuff.
we don't want to
That's
talk
how-
about
that's
it.
how I
and,
answer
and
stuff.
yes, we're going to talk about
Yes,
it.
exactly.
So back to my daughter, and when I said, her name's Victoria, I said, what happened when you were up 4-1, 40-love there? You threw in a couple doubles, or she said, Dad, what happened when you were up 2-0 love 3. Now, hold on, Jim. Connor serving, love 3, love 40. I'm up 2-0, 2 tight sets. This is like, for me, when the draw came out and I'm seeing McEnroe versus Connors, 91. By the way, that was the year I made the semis of the Australian Open.
Yeah.
So I'm in, for me, in my prime. Now Jimbo's, 39, and I had practiced with Jimmy a lot. I knew him well. Of course, I knew, that he and my brother couldn't stand each other. But I had practiced with Jimmy for a short period of time. He actually lived in Connecticut. So he would come down and we would practice together in New York. And, he played a more similar style of game to me than my brother. No one could play like my brother.
Right.
But I played like a poor man's version of how Jimmy played. So I'm up 2-0. He's serving love 3, love 40. And again, Jim, it goes back to it was the same thing with Becker, which was later. But I thought to myself, I got him. This is over.
Well, why wouldn't you think that at that point?
Well, yeah. And then I just, somehow he managed to hold serve that game. And the first 2 sets were close. So it wasn't like I was blowing him out. It's extremely competitive. And somehow he managed to get back into it, get the crowd into it, manipulate the chair umpire, Dana LaCanto, not that I remember his name or anything.
No.
Who just basically shit the bed, couldn't deal with it. But I've had more people come up to me, Jim, over the years that said, I was there until, as you said, 1:35 in the morning, and I was rooting for you. And I said, really? Because I didn't hear you. Because the only people rooting for me that I could tell were the 6 people in my box.
Yeah.
My parents, my friend, and my girlfriend at the time. And then my girlfriend, of all things, at that time, Jim, gave me an ultimatum on the ride back to my house in Long Island at 4 in the freaking morning.
Stop.
Like, is this something you want? And I'm like, are you kidding me? So suffice to say, that relationship did not last that much longer. I'm saying, do you think that maybe timing here? It took me like 6 months to get over that loss. That's the bottom line. But I did. I did get over it, and I did come back in other matches when I was 2-0 down, and I had a pretty good record doing that. But this was one of those matches that, you're proud to be part of it, but it still hurts.
How
It
could
still
it not?
hurts to this day.
I think, yeah, I was gonna say 6 months. 6 months. The fact that you could turn the page on that in 6 months. I mean, there's some things you never get over, right? So, some things that you hope you never get over, but you hope to get beyond. But I mean, it is part of the lore. It's part of your career. I think I made the point. I didn't bring this up first. I think you had an amazing career, Patrick. Because I played and I know Southern California tennis. The fact that you were ranked in the top 30 in the world is an amazing accomplishment. And never mind everything you've done off of the court. It's an amazing thing, honestly.
Well, listen, coming from you, I've always admired you, Jim, for what you do. And in fact, years ago, you remember when I came in and was on your show, Rome is Burning, that was on ESPN. I was so excited to come out to LA and, sit in this hotel room for 5 days and come on your show. Because what you do and what you've done with your career is absolutely phenomenal. I think I've done more in my career post-playing, post-competitive tennis, and I'm very proud of that.
Absolutely.
And I credit people like you, because it's guys like you that bust your ass, that get it done year after year, that I respect. And I love, listening to you, and I listen to your shows so many times, your radio shows and your posse of people that call. I do my own radio show now once a week on Sirius, which for me is a lot of fun. But it also scratches that itch for me. Wow, I'm doing something that Jim Rome did. Chris Mad Dog Russo, my buddy, who's a big tennis guy. You guys are the pinnacle of this industry. So for me to just even have a little part of it is very exciting for me. And I just want to thank you for all you've done to inspire me over the years. And I'll tell you one other quick story that,
By the way, I'm not worthy of any of that, Patrick, but thank you very much. That means the world to me. Thank you very much for saying so.
Yeah, your listeners and everybody knows that for what you do and what you bring to the table, your energy level, because it's similar in sports. And again, I go back to, the year my brother lost to Lendl in the '84 French Open final. And I was there playing juniors, and I was in the junior doubles final, Jim, with Luke Jensen, who played at USC. Sure. And we were tight, and guess who we played in the finals of the boys doubles? Boris Becker and another German guy. Okay. Wow. But the point is, my parents flew over for the final to watch John play Lendl. And John had the 2 sets to love lead. And then he had the meltdown, and he lost it 7-5 in the fifth. And when he lost the fifth set, I was going to go on to the center court to play the junior doubles, because they said, this match is going so fast, we're going to put you guys on center court, meaning the junior doubles. And I'm like, holy shit. Can you believe this? My brother's going to win the French, and I'm going to get to go out there on the center court at Roland Garros and play in the junior doubles. And he loses the third set. They said, well, wait, it's still going pretty fast. We'll wait, see what happens. Loses the fourth set. And then they said, you guys need to go out to court 1, the other court, to play the match. So I go out there, and I speak pretty decent French, Jim. So I'm listening to the score in my, coming over, I can hear it over the loudspeaker while I'm playing the junior doubles. And my brother loses 7-5 in the fifth. My parents walk over, Jim, I kid you not, from center court at the French Open to the little side court. There's maybe 50 people watching the junior doubles. They were white like ghosts.
Wow.
And then I said to my brother that night, we all went out, had a little celebratory, whatever, dinner, some drinks. And I said, oh, big bro, don't worry, man. I said, you're gonna get another shot. And you know what he said to me, Jim? He looked at me, he said, that was my shot. That was it. He knew he would never get that, and it boggles my mind, because years later I played doubles with him a few times, and he had that ability to just focus and reel it in and be like, we're gonna rip these guys' throats. It's like this understanding. It's like the Kobe Bryant gene or something, where you just now's the time, and we got to get it done right now. And if you don't get it done, it's over. And that's kind of what I felt that he felt that night, which is more of the reason why, in following Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, as I have been lucky enough to do with ESPN for now almost 30 years, and seeing those guys come back from those types of epic losses, and kind of put it behind them and say, I can come back from this. You know, when Borg lost to my brother in the U.S. Open final, he was like, I'm done. Like, this guy's better than me. He was 25, 26, Jim. He'd won 11 majors.
And by the way, I was going there, and I'm so glad you brought that up, Patrick. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't do that ever. I was going there next. But yeah, like he broke him, right? He broke him.
Yeah.
I don't mean he broke his serve. I mean, he broke him.
Right. He broke him mentally, physically, to the point where and he said, I'm done. No mas. Roberto Duran, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But what's made this last generation of players so incredible to watch is that they've been broken, but yet they come back. You know, when Federer lost to Nadal in one of Nadal's 14 French Open wins, right? It was 2-0-1. You got that, Jim?
Yeah, 2-0-1. Like, ran right through him.
And what did Federer do that night? He had a party with his team. He went out because he invited them all in, and he continued to, okay, I'm not going to let this one loss. And then that was when Nadal finally beat him at Wimbledon in that epic, final that went to, into the darkness.
So help me with this. Like, I'm partial to our generation, but is this generation generally more resilient? If they're all able to put this behind them more quickly, what is that a fair statement, or what changed? How are they different in that regard?
Well, I think they are more resilient, but I think part of the reason, I mean, Connors was certainly as resilient as ever, right? Because he was able to do that at 39. And if you go back into the 60s and 70s, you had Ken Rosewall making multiple finals in his 40s, got destroyed by Connors, who was a young kid coming up. But I think what happened was these guys were not only resilient, and of course they were the better players, they were just genetically better. But because of all the technology, because of all the research about recovery and fitness, and most importantly, keeping yourself in tip-top condition year in, year out, like LeBron does, like what LeBron's been, like what Tom Brady was able to do. Those guys were able to figure out to use their skills, which are God-given, and make it so that they can continue to do it at the highest level, way beyond what we thought was possible. And that's what we saw with that generation of Fed, Nadal, and Novak Djokovic. Okay, who's still doing it, by the way, at 39.
Right. Amazing. So, what's interesting, Patrick, you like me, you're you were a pro athlete at a very high level, but you've always been a huge sports fan. I wanted to be a pro athlete, and then when I realized that was not going to happen, I wanted to figure out a way to stay in sports. But as a little kid, I was obsessed
You
with
figured
sports.
that out.
All right, so that was good, luckily. So, but I had my guys. My idols growing up as a kid in Los Angeles were Ron Say of the LA Dodgers, Gail Goodrich of the Lakers, and Terry Bradshaw of the Steelers. However, and I tend to overlook this sometimes, my guy, who I adored, was Borg, because I did play tennis.
Yeah.
I loved Bjorn Borg. So when he retired at 26, how did that hit John? What was John's reaction, and what did John tell Bjorn?
That hit John very hard, Jim. In fact, he's said over the years, and he and Bjorn are still very close, and we did many years together, John and I, at the Laver Cup, the team competition between Europe and the rest of the world. And Bjorn was the captain for Team Europe, John captain for Team World, me his vice captain. So we got to spend great moments with Bjorn in the last 10 years. So they're still very tight. And I think in retro, John has said, and he said it publicly, that really hurt him. The fact that Bjorn retired, that it kind of took away a little bit, I think, of his motivation. Because when you look at what, Rafa, Fed, and Novak did, they continue to push each other. They continue to push. And, I think Bjorn and John and, Jimmy, to a certain extent, but Jimmy played a lot longer. But he had some sort of sabbaticals where he didn't play for a while and then he'd come back, is that they didn't realize if they just stuck with it, that they could do this for 10 more years.
Yeah.
And because they just didn't know it was possible at that point. And Borg had spent, if you ever get to see the documentary, the Borg McEnroe documentary is fascinating because it focuses a little more on Borg, because my brother didn't want to participate in the making of it. It was a Swedish team that put it together. But to see the way that, his dedication at a very young age, And he was 15, 16, and he was like a full-time professional. So by the time he got to 26, he felt like it was a lifetime. And I think in those years, the players didn't have the same sort of balance off the court where they could manage their own lives, their personal lives. Obviously now you've got players making so much more money, so they have the ability and the wherewithal to say, okay, I don't need to play every week. I don't need to play week after week. I can take some time off. But we would have loved to, what the head-to-head was between my brother and Borg?
Tell me.
7-7.
Yeah, incredible.
And Federer and Nadal played 70, 80 times.
Right.
Djokovic, Nadal. So they had so many more opportunities to play in these epic matches. But when you look back at history, Jim, I think the fact that my brother and Borg only played 14 times.
What a shame, right?
A shame, but it also makes us, I think that's part of the reason why we appreciate it so much more.
Fair.
Because it didn't happen that often.
Right. So, Patrick, when you were growing up, who were your sports idols? Were they tennis players? Were they other athletes? Were they not sports? Who were the people you looked up to growing up?
Well, I love the Knicks. I was a huge Knicks. When we got the opportunity, Jim, to get on the train from Queens, from Douglaston, where we grew up, and go to a Knicks game or a Ranger game, for me, that was like the ultimate. So going to see, we saw in their prime, the Knicks teams of the 90s with Coach Riley and, Ewing and Starks and Oak and, Anthony Mason, may he rest in peace, and the Rangers, Nicky Fotiu and Eddie Jockman, let's go way back. So
love all that stuff. I love all that stuff.
We loved our traditional New York sports. But I'll tell you this, because I grew up very close to Shea Stadium, and all my buddies were Met fans. The years of Straw, of Doc Gooden, Keith Hernandez, who I love on TV, and he's a good buddy of the McEnroes. We love him. But my dad got tickets, Jim, 1977, Yankee Stadium. What game am I talking about? Reggie, 3 homers.
The straw that stirs the drink.
I'm sitting in the upper deck with my dad coming from Queens. We took our little car, a little Datsun, and I went over there, and when he hit the 3rd home run, the place went freaking crazy. My dad grabbed me by the arm. He said, "Son, we're out of here. This is nuts." So from that moment on, I became a Yankee fan. And I'll give you another little tidbit. My brother, we were all Yankee. We were the traditional New York teams: Yankees, Giants. Although we went to a lot of Jet games because our neighbors had Jet tickets. Rangers and Knicks, right? The traditional teams. So my brother was a Yankee fan too, my brother John. But then when he lost to Borg in that epic final in 1980 at Wimbledon, and the Yankees at one point lost the world. I think they got swept by the Dodgers in a World Series. And you remember when Steinbrenner apologized to the New York fans?
Oh yes.
And my brother took offense to that.
Yeah.
Because he had come in second at Wimbledon, and that was the first time ever at Wimbledon they cheered for him. Because all the stuff he'd gone through. And he didn't like it, did my brother John. So that day he said, I'm a Met fan.
Oh, wow.
And now you see him at all the games. He's got the Met hat on. And I'm still a Yankee fan.
Incredible.
Because I didn't have that, because I remember that moment with Reggie and those 3 homers. But to answer your question, I used to play against a wall at our club where we grew up in Douglaston, Queens. And I used to play imaginary matches between Rod Laver and Ken Rosewall. And I would play him against the wall, and I'd play for hours. And Laver would always win 6-4 in the 5th. So can you imagine how long that would take?
Forever.
So I'd just sit there for hours. And
the outcome was always the same, too.
Always the same. Yeah, it was always the same. And Dick Lynch, who played for the Giants, I don't know if you remember this name, Jim.
Uh-huh.
He played for the Giants, and then he became the radio voice for many years here in New York for a long time. And his family, their house was across the street from the Douglaston Club, where I would hit against the wall. And my mom would call the Lynches at 6 p.m., 6:30, and say to Mrs. Lynch, "Could you please tell Patrick to get on his tricycle and come home for dinner?" And that's what I used to do.
That's the way it used to be. Like, we used to stay out until it got dark, right? And our dad would come on, come on, Jimmy, come on.
Yeah,
Hey,
no cell phones, no nothing.
You know what's wild, Patrick? I just thought about this. I actually spent, I think, 1 week, maybe 2 sessions, but 1 week. I went to Alan Fox's tennis camp at Pepperdine.
Malibu,
Yeah, Malibu. But he was so far ahead of his time, you know. So imagine when I was a kid and he was talking about the psychology of tennis back then, because he was that guy. That was really an interesting experience, because the game is so mental, you know. But back then we weren't talking about those things, but that guy did. That guy was. That was really interesting.
He was way ahead of his time. And my good buddy Brad Gilbert, who's spent a year at Pepperdine, and Coach Foxy as we call him, was his coach, talks about him all the time. He had a great book, Winning Ugly, his book. But Alan Fox was way ahead of it. And by the way, way ahead of his time in all of sports, and now we see it, and it's a good thing to see. And that's athletes are not as afraid to talk about their mental well-being, whether it's Simone Biles, whether it's Michael Phelps, whether it's Naomi Osaka in tennis, team sport athletes. You don't see that as much in the team sports yet, Jim. You see it periodically because there's still that, that undercurrent of, you gotta be tough.
Right? It's better though. It's better. It's better because you hear guys say now it's okay not to be okay.
Correct.
And back then you never heard that. It was just taboo, and you couldn't show weakness when it wasn't really weakness, but we just didn't know.
Sometimes they just take it a little far in the NBA. We're taking a night off. You know what I'm saying?
I know. I'm really well of what
I'm sure you're on top of that.
Yeah. We talk about this quite a bit, man. Just keep charging top dollar and not let us see top talent. Oh, and by the way, tank all you want. Man, the association's got a lot of issues. Right about now, right?
I figured that I would be able to get you going on that because, yes, that's a huge issue. But and I say this all the time, until people stop going.
Exactly.
Actually, stop going to the game, stop paying for the tickets, stop paying for the parking, for the merch, for the drinks, for the whole thing. It's going to continue. I know Adam Silver's trying to, manage it. So Wembayama's got to play another game, before the end of the season or whatever to be eligible for the MVP.
That's the one guy you don't have to worry about, though. That's the one guy who gets it. That's the one guy. I mean, he is brilliant.
I want to ask you this, Jim, because I find this fascinating. Because I've seen this in tennis for 25 years, and now I'm starting to see it in basketball. The Europeans are they're coming.
Yeah.
And and are they coming in a way? We saw it in the last Olympics where it wasn't like we just rolled out the NBA players, just do whatever you want to do, because Luka, Nikola, Victor, SGA, the top 4 guys for the MVP. What do they have in common?
They're not American.
Bingo.
And not only that, but like Victor, Patrick, he's front and center about, I want to be that guy. I want to be the face of this league. I want to be the greatest of all time. And not only does he have the mind for it, but he's got the grit and the heart, and he gets it, man. And he gets it at a very young age.
And the other thing they have the skills to play the game.
Yes.
Because I remember the great coach, Jose Higueras, who I hired. He worked with Sampras, he worked with Federer, he worked with Courier. And I hired him when I took over USTA player development. We were at the bottom, about 20 years ago. And I said, what do we need to do? And he said, PMAC, we got a bunch of guys that know how to hit the ball, but they don't know how to play tennis. And that was pretty insightful to me, because it was basically saying, like, we've got to find players. We've got to teach. The Europeans surpassed us in teaching tennis, in coaching tennis, of how to use the court. Of course, growing up on clay helps. And I think you're starting to see that in European basketball. These guys come in. Look what happened in the NCAA tournament.
Right.
How more players coming from Europe. And that's going to continue to happen. I know it's going to happen with the NIL. That's a whole nother thing.
I was going to say, it's the NIL. They get paid. They get paid. Why not?
Well, exactly.
Come over here and get paid.
Because they used to go play in the European leagues and get paid there to work their way up. And now they can get paid just as much, if not more. And they're more well-rounded players.
They are. They absolutely are.
And that's something that the old AAU needs to look at big time.
Yes. AAU is a whole different thing. So, Patrick, I'm trying to be really respectful. This is so much fun, and you've already totally outperformed even our normal expectations. But if in that same vein, if Andy Roddick was the last American to win a major in '03, if I put you on the spot, who's going to be our next American male to win a Grand Slam event?
Someone that we haven't heard of.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hoping it'll be Ben Shelton or Lerner Tien. I think, Taylor Fritz, I think, he's been in the final. I mean, and by the way, these guys are great players, Jim. They're outstanding players. I was in an event last year in San Francisco for the Laver Cup, and I was talking to a bunch of people from that area, and I said to him, Steph Curry. I said, is he the best player right now in the end? This is last year. Is he the best player in the end? No, he's not. Okay. Is he top 5? Maybe. Is he top 10? Yeah, Okay. So that's what Taylor Fritz is. That's what Ben Shelton is. They're amazing players.
Right.
But in tennis, it's different than the team sports because it's just one player can win the tournament. And right now there's 2 players in Sinner and Alcaraz that are so far above the rest of the field. And not just the American guys, but Medvedev, who lost a double bagel today, 0-0 he lost in Monte Carlo. Sasha Zverev.
Yeah, but he handled it well, though.
I'm glad you saw that. Now, the point is that to win a major in tennis is so difficult because if you're, it's a little different. You and I are talking. The Masters are about to begin. I don't know when this is going to air, but the Masters is about to start. There's probably, how many players could win the Masters, Jim, in your view?
I mean,
give me a number.
This year,
10, 20?
Not even. And then this year it's wide open. It's wide open because the
so
guys
more
that
than that is what you're saying.
No, I'd say less than that. But it's wide open. But I see the point.
How many players could win the French Open this year?
Not 20. Not 20.
2 or 3?
Yeah, I would say.
So that's the thing about tennis is that to answer your question, I think Ben Shelton has the most upside. He's got the most athleticism and power, but Sinner and Alcaraz are just a 2 or 3 steps above him at the moment, as they are for pretty much everyone else.
It was like Tiger or the field back in the day. So leave me with that thought. What about Alcaraz? So you know how this is because you do this now and you're a sports fan. And although it's really hard to measure athletes across generations, everybody wants to talk about the GOAT. So you look at Joker and you look at the number of majors he's won, so you have your GOAT. But if Alcaraz has 7, Patrick, at age 22, could we be revisiting this conversation about who the GOAT is years down the line? Because to your point, it is so hard to win a major, and this guy's got 7 at 22. It's insane.
Yeah, he's got the ability to shatter the record. So Djokovic has 24. So obviously longevity is a huge part of it in tennis
and
because
health.
You've got to, and yeah, exactly. So Alcaraz is the most complete player I've ever seen.
Period.
I've ever seen.
Period.
Yeah, period. Yeah, because he can do it all. And he can actually do shots that, we used to think, Jim, were not even plausible. Like you're on the dead run, on the full stretch, forehand, or, and he's going for broke. And you're like, wait, what? What? How's he doing? And then he's like, does it. Or playing a drop shot from a defensive position. And Djokovic, Nadal, Federer, they took it to another level, but they sort of still played within certain parameters of the game. And Alcaraz has completely changed that dynamic. So now at our academy, the John McEnroe Tennis Academy, which I run here in New York City,
yeah, sure.
That's my day job. The kids are actually trying to do these things. Huh. So because they're seeing it and they're like, okay, well, maybe I'll try that. And so as a coach or as a teacher, as I am in that realm, I'm like, I can't tell them not to try that. Because this is what this guy is doing. So he can play on every surface. He can play any type of style. He's the most freakish athlete I've seen on a tennis court. So the answer to your question is yes, he certainly can from a talent perspective. The question is the health and longevity and taking care of himself and doing what the LeBrons and the Tom Bradys and, the Novak Djokovic has done so that they can continue to play at that elite level into their early, mid, late 30s.
Great stuff. Patrick, one last thought. You're the president of the International Tennis Hall of Fame, and that's in Newport, Rhode Island. Special place. I'm curious, last thought, how special do you expect Roger Federer's induction ceremony to be this August, and how excited are you for that?
Well, the tickets went on sale, and they sold out in less than 2 minutes. And I've never seen that happen before. But more importantly than that is that I don't think there's an athlete on the planet today that has the type of popularity that Roger Federer has. Now, his aura, his nature, his way he deals with people. I mean, you tell me. I mean, LeBron is incredible, but LeBron doesn't resonate in the same way Federer does globally. He does in this country, of course. And then you could look at Lionel Messi, Mbappe, the two great soccer players, one from Argentina, one from France. Tiger, you're forgetting about what's going on recently with him. But what Federer has been able to do as a personality above and partly it was because of the way he played, but also because of the way he handled himself, is I've never seen anything like it. I really haven't. I've been lucky enough to be around a lot of great athletes from, not just tennis, but a lot of sports. This guy moves the needle more than anyone I've ever seen. And Serena's an all-time great. She's going to go, if she doesn't come back, Jim, she'll be eligible to go into the Hall of Fame next year. So that will be an incredible moment. But what Roger Federer does as far as not just transcending tennis, but sport, is really remarkable to see the effect that he has on people around the world.
I think what it is, and I fancy myself, Patrick, as kind of a wordsmith. I like words. It's hard to come up with a word to describe what you're talking about. He's just kind of regal. You know what I mean? I mean, they're classy people. They're dignified people. There's just something he's got. It's kind of hard for me even to find the word for it to describe what it is. You know it when you see it. But I agree with exactly what you're saying, although I'm looking for the word. But regal is the only word that comes to mind. Patrick, considering that you didn't necessarily know this was going to happen, my man, you sure showed up a certain way, the way you always have. And nothing but love and respect for you. That was so much fun, and I'm so glad you made time for that. That was an absolutely awesome catch-up. Dude, I appreciate you so much.
You have no idea how much I appreciate being on with you, spending time with you, because, again, I'm going to say it one more time. What you've done in your career is nothing short of regal yourself. And you nailed it. That's the word for Federer. And when it comes to radio and television, that's the word for Rome regal.
That means the world to me. Patrick, you're the absolute best. I am going to produce this up, get it out, get it to the masses. And it is so great to see you, man. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
All the best. All the best.